For more than 60 years, a single organization has held immense power over the world's most vital resource. That organization is the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, better known as OPEC. It has acted as the central banker of oil, controlling the flow of crude, fuels our industries, powers our cities, shapes the fortunes of nations. From its headquarters in Vienna, this cartel has dictated production levels, influenced prices, and wielded geopolitical leverage across the globe. Its decisions have started and ended economic booms, and its internal politics have mirrored wider world tensions. But today, on May 24, 2024, we are witnessing a fracture in this powerful alliance. One of its most influential and forward-looking members, the United Arab Emirates, has announced its intention to leave the group. This is not just an administrative change or a minor disagreement over policy. It is a seismic event with the potential to redraw the map of global energy. The UAE, OPEC's third-largest producer, has decided to chart its own course. This decision signals a fundamental break from the collective strategy that has defined the oil market for decades, and ushers in a new period of uncertainty and competition. The magnitude of this departure cannot be overstated. It represents a direct challenge to the established order and the leadership of Saudi Arabia, the cartel's de facto leader. For years, the world has relied on OPEC to provide a degree of stability and predictability in a notoriously volatile market. By coordinating the output of its members, the organization has acted as a buffer against wild price swings, managing supply to meet global demand. The UAE's exit threatens to dismantle this mechanism, potentially unleashing a new era of price wars and market fragmentation as producers prioritize their own national interests over collective discipline. In September 1960, representatives from 5 oil-producing nations gathered in Baghdad. Out of this meeting, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries was born. They sought to coordinate and unify petroleum policies, secure fair and stable prices for producers, ensure an efficient, regular supply to consumers, guarantee a fair return on capital for investors. It was a declaration of economic independence. The outbreak of the Yom Kippur War in October 1973 saw Arab members of OPEC, organized as OAPEC, impose an oil embargo against nations that supported Israel, including the United States, sent shockwaves through the global economy. Suddenly, the world woke up to its profound dependence on Middle Eastern oil and the immense power that OPEC now commanded. The era of cheap, abundant energy was over, quadrupling from around $3 per barrel to nearly $12 by 1974. This dramatic price hike triggered a massive transfer of wealth from oil-consuming nations to OPEC members. The economies of the industrialized world sputtered, facing stagflation, high inflation, stagnant economic growth. Meanwhile, the treasuries of OPEC nations swelled, funding ambitious national development projects. Modern cities rising from the desert sands, OPEC had discovered its ultimate leverage: the ability to turn the tap on or off, and in doing so, dictate the economic fortunes of the world. The United Arab Emirates has never been content with the status quo. From its formation in 1971, it pursued a relentless drive for modernization. Economic diversification transformed quiet desert sheikdoms into a gleaming global hub for finance, trade, tourism. That national ambition shows up in the energy strategy led by ADNOC. For years, the UAE poured tens of billions into oil and gas infrastructure, not to slow down, but to scale up. The goal: expand production capacity, be a reliable, low-cost, low-carbon supplier. ADNOC's vision went beyond new wells. It upgraded fields, used artificial intelligence, used big data, and explored new reservoirs. Leadership acted more like a global energy supermajor. By investing counter-cyclically in low-price periods, the UAE secured tech and services, cheaply building capacity while others cut back. It was a calculated bet on the future. Efficiency would win. The expansion was about future-proofing the economy. Leaders accept the energy transition is real. Oil has a finite horizon. So they will monetize reserves while demand holds and reinvest proceeds into knowledge-based industries, renewable energy, advanced technology. The plan: use oil wealth to build a bridge to a post-oil future. Pump and sell fast. The investment raised the UAE's maximum sustainable production capacity, with a public target of 5 million barrels per day by 2027. That gives the UAE significant spare capacity, vital for global energy security. But it also conflicted with OPEC. The UAE's push to produce and sell more oil was curtailed by OPEC production limits, fueling national frustration. The United Arab Emirates' departure from OPEC sends a powerful shockwave through the delicate political landscape of the Gulf. For decades, the Gulf Cooperation Council, comprised of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, has sought to present a united front on key economic and security issues. While internal disagreements have always existed, the shared interest in stable oil markets managed through OPEC has served as a powerful glue binding the major producers together. The UAE's decision to walk away unilaterally shatters this veneer of cohesion, signaling a major fracture in the traditional power structure of the region. For the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE's exit presents a direct and formidable challenge to its long-held status as the undisputed leader of the oil world. For over 60 years, Riyadh has leveraged its position as the largest producer within OPEC to steer the global energy market. The UAE's departure is a public vote of no confidence in that leadership. It demonstrates that another major Gulf producer believes it can achieve a better outcome outside the Saudi-led framework, a notion that undermines the very premise of Riyadh's authority. The immediate consequence for Saudi Arabia is a significant weakening of its primary tool for market management, OPEC. The cartel's ability to influence prices depends on its control over a substantial share of global supply and particularly its collective spare capacity. The UAE holds a significant portion of that spare capacity. With its exit, OPEC's leverage is diminished. Saudi Arabia now faces the prospect of managing a less powerful, less cohesive group, while a major new competitor, a former ally, operates just across its border, free to act as it pleases. This makes the task of balancing the market infinitely more complex. This development forces a difficult strategic choice upon the Saudi leadership. The culmination of these mounting pressures arrived on April 28, 2026. In a move that sent shockwaves through the global energy industry, the United Arab Emirates officially announced its decision to withdraw from OPEC, ending a membership that had spanned more than 5 decades. The statement was carefully worded, citing the country's desire to pursue an independent strategy focused on accelerating its production growth. The effective date was set for May 1, 2026, giving the market and the world a clear, albeit short, timeline to digest the momentous news. It was a clean break, a decisive end to a partnership that had become more restrictive than beneficial. The announcement was not just a statement of intent. It was backed by concrete numbers and ambitious targets. The UAE reiterated its firm goal of increasing its production capacity to 5 million barrels per day by 2027. By untethering itself from the cartel's quota system, the country signaled its readiness to unleash its full production might onto the global market. This move was a direct consequence of the billions invested by ADNOC. The UAE was finally positioning itself to reap the full rewards of its long-term strategic planning, free from collective bargaining and compromises. By leaving, the UAE was not only challenging Saudi Arabia's leadership, but also fundamentally weakening the cartel's grip on the global oil supply. OPEC's power has always relied on the unity of its major producers. The departure of its third-largest member, and one of the few with significant spare capacity, dealt a severe blow to the organization's credibility and its ability to manage prices. The immediate impact of the UAE's departure on global oil markets is the erosion of one of OPEC's most valuable contributions: predictability. For decades, traders, investors, and governments have relied on the cartel to provide a degree of stability in a notoriously volatile market. By coordinating the output of its members OPEC and its allies, known as OPEC+, acted as a central bank for oil adjusting supply to prevent wild price swings. This gave the market a sense of direction and a framework for forecasting future prices. The UAE's exit dismantles a key part of that structure. A major producer is now operating outside this system of collective management, introducing a significant new variable into the supply equation. This move fundamentally undermines the production discipline that has been the bedrock of OPEC's strategy, especially in recent years. When the UAE was inside the tent, disagreements were hashed out behind closed doors, and a unified policy, however difficult to achieve, was eventually presented to the world. Now, the world's third-largest OPEC producer is a free agent. The temptation for the UAE to use its full production capacity to gain market share is immense. This could set off a chain reaction. Other producers within OPEC, outside OPEC, may feel compelled to increase their own output to avoid losing customers, leading to a breakdown of the fragile cooperation that has kept prices relatively stable. For the global oil market, this translates into a higher degree of uncertainty. Traders must now account for the independent actions of the UAE, in addition to the collective decisions of a weakened OPEC and the policies of other non-OPEC giants like the United States and Brazil. This makes pricing oil far more complex. The shift from a seller's market dominated by a powerful cartel to a more competitive landscape creates a significant advantage for the world's largest energy consumers. Nations like China, nations like India, whose voracious appetite for oil fuels their massive economies. They have had little choice but to pay the price, set by the cartel: economic growth, inflation, energy security. The UAE's decision to go independent, giving these influential buyers a powerful new lever to pull in negotiations. They are no longer dealing with a united front, but with competing suppliers. This new environment allows major importers to adopt a divide-and-rule strategy. China can now negotiate directly with the UAE. China can now negotiate directly with Saudi Arabia, playing their rivalry against each other to secure more favorable terms. They can seek longer-term contracts at discounted prices, demand better credit terms, link oil supply deals to other strategic investments. For countries like India and emerging economies across Asia, the prospect of lower oil prices is a massive economic boon. Cheaper energy reduces inflationary pressure, lowers the cost of transportation, lowers the cost of manufacturing, leaves more money in the pockets of consumers, stimulating domestic growth, improving trade balances. For the United States and Europe, the implications are more nuanced. While they also benefit from lower global oil prices, their primary concern has often been market stability. The predictability offered by OPEC, even when it meant higher prices, was valuable for economic planning. However, the UAE's move may also align with Western geopolitical goals. The U.S. has frequently expressed frustration with OPEC+ production cuts, contributing to global inflation, aiding Russia. An independent UAE, boosting its output, could be seen as a more reliable partner in ensuring a well-supplied market, reducing the influence of Riyadh, reducing the influence of Moscow. The cumulative effect of the UAE's departure, the loss of predictability, the breakdown of production discipline, the fragmentation of spare capacity, points toward one overarching conclusion: the world is likely entering an era of greater oil price volatility. The central banker of oil has lost one of its most important board members, weakening its ability to smooth out the market's inherent boom and bust cycles. Without the steadying hand of a fully unified OPEC+, prices are more likely to swing dramatically in response to shifts in supply, demand, and geopolitical sentiment. This creates a more challenging environment for businesses, governments, and consumers everywhere. This new reality will be further complicated by logistical and geopolitical choke points. A significant portion of the world's oil, including the increased volumes from the UAE, must pass through the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Iran, a regional rival to both the UAE and Saudi Arabia, sits on the other side of this critical waterway. In the past, Iran's threats to close the strait were a risk to the entire OPEC bloc. Now, with Gulf unity fractured, Iran could be tempted to exploit the rivalry, potentially targeting the shipping of specific nations. A crisis in the Strait of Hormuz in this new, fragmented environment could trigger a price panic far more severe than in the past, given the now divided response capability of the region's major producers. The role of non-OPEC producers, particularly the United States with its shale industry, becomes even more critical in this volatile landscape. American shale oil is known for its ability to respond relatively quickly to price signals, with higher prices incentivizing more drilling. In theory, U.S. production could act as a balancing force, ramping up when prices are high and cutting back when they are low. However, shale production is driven by thousands of independent commercial decisions, not a single state policy, and is subject to its own financial and logistical constraints. It is a less reliable and more chaotic stabilizer than the deliberate policy of a swing producer like Saudi Arabia. Ultimately, the global economy may need to adapt to a new normal, where energy prices are less stable and more prone to shocks. For industries with high energy costs, like airlines, shipping, and manufacturing, this uncertainty makes long-term planning more difficult and could dampen investment. Governments will face greater challenges in managing inflation and economic growth. While consumers may enjoy periods of lower prices during supply gluts, they will also be more exposed to painful price spikes during shortages. The decision by the United Arab Emirates to leave OPEC marks a pivotal moment in the history of global energy. It is far more than a simple departure of one member from a long-standing organization. It represents the culmination of powerful economic, political, and strategic forces that have been building for years. We have seen how the UAE's ambitious national strategy came into direct conflict with OPEC's quota system, driven by massive investments in production capacity by ADNOC, and constrained by OPEC's quota system. This was not merely a dispute over barrels and revenue. It was a fundamental clash between a nation racing to secure its future and a cartel clinging to a model of collective control. The UAE's exit is a clear signal that the old order is breaking down. The consequences of this fracture are profound, beginning in the Gulf itself. The departure shatters the myth of unwavering unity among the region's oil producers, transforming decades of managed cooperation into a new phase of open competition. This places Saudi Arabia in a difficult position, challenging its leadership and weakening its primary tool for market management. For the global market, the departure erodes the predictability that OPEC once provided. With one of the world's most significant producers now operating as a free agent, the market loses a key stabilizing force. This introduces a new era of uncertainty, where supply is less coordinated and prices are likely to become more volatile, swinging more freely with the tides of competition and geopolitical events. Ultimately, the UAE's move is a rational response to a changing world. With the global energy transition looming on the horizon, the window for monetizing hydrocarbon reserves is narrowing. The logic of restraining production to keep prices high becomes less compelling when future demand is projected to decline. In this context, the new logic is to produce as much as possible, as efficiently as possible, to capture market share while it still exists. This get it while you can strategy is a paradigm shift, from long-term price preservation to a race against time. The UAE is the first major player to formally break from the pack and act on this new reality. The departure was a calculated strategic pivot, born from a divergence in national vision from OPEC's leadership. It weakens the cartel's influence, creates a new competitive dynamic in the Middle East, shifts bargaining power toward major energy consumers like China and India. It also makes the global economy more vulnerable to price shocks by fragmenting the world's spare production capacity. What we are witnessing is the unraveling of a system that has governed the oil market for over half a century, forcing every nation to reassess its position in a more fragmented and competitive energy world. Looking ahead, the post-UAE landscape presents several plausible futures for the global oil market. The first possibility is that OPEC adapts and reforms. Faced with the loss of a key member and the threat of further fragmentation, the remaining countries, led by Saudi Arabia, could attempt to reinvent the organization. However, this path would require significant compromise from Riyadh and would be difficult to achieve in an environment of growing rivalry. A second, more likely future is one of rising competition and the continued fragmentation of supply. The UAE's move could embolden other producers with similar frustrations to leave OPEC or simply disregard their quotas more openly. This would accelerate the transition from a market managed by a cartel to one defined by a multipolar struggle for market share: Saudi Arabia, the United States, Russia, and now an independent UAE. In this scenario, oil prices would likely become more volatile and potentially trend lower over the long term, as producers prioritize volume over price. This would create a challenging environment for high-cost producers and nations heavily dependent on oil revenue. A third possibility is the formation of new, more fluid coalitions. Instead of a single formal cartel, we might see the emergence of ad hoc alliances based on shared short-term interests. This would create a more complex and dynamic geopolitical landscape, where energy relationships are more transactional and less bound by the rigid structures of the past. Power would become more diffuse, shifting constantly as new alignments form and dissolve in response to changing market conditions. Ultimately, the medium-term outcome will likely be a hybrid of these scenarios: a weaker, less influential OPEC coexisting with a more competitive and fragmented market. The UAE's departure is a landmark event because it is so deeply intertwined with the energy transition. It is a sign that the producers themselves recognize that the endgame for oil has begun. The decision to prioritize volume today reflects a belief that tomorrow's demand is not guaranteed. While the age of oil is far from over, the age of OPEC's unquestioned dominance appears to be drawing to a close. We are entering a new, more turbulent era, one where the rules of the global energy game are being rewritten before our very eyes.